Hello everyone, my name is Clyde, and today we're going to be talking about the Karl XIV Johan. Not the man, but the Tier 9 premium battleship that's coming to World of Warships very, very soon. She is a pan-European battleship with 12 305mm guns, tons of torpedoes, and some very inaccurate secondaries that we'll talk about with a little anecdote I'm going to tell you later on in the video. Now, full disclosure, Wargaming did give me this ship for free in hopes that I would choose to create this review, and here we are. You'll be able to buy the K14J. I'm having a hard time coming up with a nickname for this thing because they're all just hard to say. Johan is another ship. K14J sounds like a droid in Star Wars. Karl seems a little too personal.
I'm Karl.
And Karl XIV Johan takes 4 years to say. But you'll be able to buy the K14J in the armory for 19,300 doubloons, or in a very expensive Admiral pack for 33,500 doubloons. The Admiral pack is going to come with a 10-point commander and the interdimensional shift camouflage, which makes her look like a certain time-traveling DeLorean. Kinda. That means that she's expensive. So how can you know if she's worth the cost? I can't tell you if she is worth the cost, because that really depends on what you find fun and, of course, your personal financial situation, but I can tell you a little bit about what makes the ship special. Karl is another entry into that category of battleships that has a whole bunch of guns, but they're a little bit smaller than what you'd experience on other ships. Now, personally, I like that recipe for a battleship where I get to shoot a little bit more often, but that's not for everybody. Karl also has excellent stealth. In fact, it's one of her defining, unique characteristics that makes her stand out from other ships, and we'll talk about this in detail as we proceed. Not to mention, she has the ability to launch a huge volume of pan-Euro style, fast-moving, easy to hit with low-damage torpedoes, which is very unique, of course, among battleships. With the exception of her Hydroacoustic Search, the consumables for Karl here are pretty standard fare, and we'll talk about the hydros in detail in a later section. Her hull repair is a very bog-standard hull repair that's very common to a lot of battleships at her tier. In this case, with my build, she heals 437 hit points per second with a very standard 80-second cooldown time. And like almost every ship, she's got a standard damage control party as well. Karl XIV Johan includes this really cool green and black camo that we're very familiar with from the destroyers of the Pan-European line as well. It's a great looking camouflage, and it looks great on this battleship as well. For those who buy that Admiral pack I mentioned, you'd get the interdimensional shift camo. That's the one that tries to make it look like a DeLorean from the movie Back to the Future. Pretty cool and everything, but again, only available to the whaliest of whales. Way too hot in here. Take this thing off. This is a video in my hot take series, and for each one of these videos we compare a ship's capabilities against those of its peers, ships of the same tier and class. We rate each capability on a scale of 1 to 5, and at the end of each hot take I share with you my build and I explain why I put the ship together that way. Sound simple enough? Let's get started. When I first loaded up in K14J, I found the guns kind of underwhelming. I was primarily trying to use her AP at first, and I was getting a lot of low damage salvos or bouncing shells. The reload was quick, and that was pretty nice, but the AP shells have the second worst pen at 12 kilometers of all Tier 9 battleships, only beating out Illinois, which you probably remember has 203mm cruiser guns. Karl's AP really only gets citadels against lightly armored targets or heavier armored targets when you're very close and you've got a good angle. It's not impossible, of course, to set up those shots thanks to your good concealment and your ability to maneuver in stealth, but it certainly isn't automatic. You're not going to be able to like citadel anything you want from any angle that you want. Her dispersion also ranks in the bottom half of the Tier 9 battleship list as well. This isn't exactly uncommon for ships that have 12 guns or more, like Marlborough. And at the far end of her 19.1 kilometer gun range, you'll find that she still does get plenty of hits due to the fact that you're launching those 12 shells. Plus, her Sigma is 1.8, which is decent, although I'd prefer it if it were a 2.0, which is kind of where I start saying that a ship is accurate. While I think the AP has its uses for closer or lightly armored targets, it wasn't until I started leaning in on the HE that I started to see what this ship could really do. With a 28% fire chance and all those guns, she generates 8.1 fires per minute, placing her 6th among all Tier 9 battleships, tied with Alsace. Now, I had to do a little math to calculate this value because she is taking a 2-second main battery reload nerf on patch day, which was not yet applied to the version of the test ship that I used to make today's video. So a little cross multiply here, a little divide there. Hopefully I did my math correctly. Now, that's not to say that you guys should sleep on the AP entirely. She still only penetrates 51 millimeters of armor with her high explosive shells due to the smaller caliber of her main battery. This is a ship that requires you to swap shells back and forth from type to type in order to best suit the situation that you find yourself in. Overall, I'm going to give her a 3 for her guns. The AP is weak for her tier, but the HE works well enough in most situations, and her volume of fire makes up for any lack of accuracy or dispersion concern you might have. Plus, if you're mainlining the HE, you're always ready for that rogue DD that's going to pop up way too close. The torpedoes on this thing are my favorite battleship torps at tier 9 right now. Dyson does have more torpedo DPM, but Karl can stealth torp in a battleship, and its torpedoes are 19 knots faster than those found on the Japanese battleship. The reload is really fast, and the angles are quite usable, although there were some times when I was in close engagements that I wish the angles were even wider than they are. I'm going to rate these torpedoes a 4, because they're easy to hit with, and you can use them very often. Their damage is quite low because they're basically pan-European destroyer-style torpedoes, which you're already familiar with, but all in all, I think these are very usable and you should be launching them frequently. K-14J's hit points come in at 72,900, which is kind of the top of the bottom third of the list of Tier 9 battleships. She's not particularly well armored either. Instead, she relies on her incredible stealth to avoid taking damage in the first place, rather than trying to tank it through a combination of hit points and metal plating. She does have an underwater citadel, and it's protected by a kind of a funky turtleback, which does help quite a bit, but none of the armor thresholds are particularly high, so angling against incoming fire is going to be your friend here. If you absolutely must make a game return in front of your enemies, try to wait until you've gone dark. This is made a lot easier by the fact that Karl's base detection range is the absolute best of all Tier 9 battleships released in the game right now, by over a mile. It's actually 1.81 kilometers better than the second best ship, which is the Lion. When built for stealth, Karl's at-sea detection range drops all the way down to 10.6 kilometers. This is a battleship, remember, and that's actually stealthier than half of the Tier 9 cruisers that are in the game. The ship has a very standard, kind of common battleship-style hull repair that comes with 4 charges to help her recover hit points when she takes damage, so I'm going to rate her a 4 for survivability. I love this stealth approach to survivability that the ship has, and although her armor scheme is a little bit modest, it seems to me that she doesn't give up that much in terms of healing potential or hit points when compared with other really well-loved battleships at this tier. Karl is equipped with hydros, which is quite rare on battleships to begin with, but she also has the only non-German hydros for any battleship at Tier 9. In fact, she's the only non-German or non-British battleship in the entire game that has hydros of any kind at all. Karl's acoustics pick up at ships at about 5 kilometers, and they pick up torpedoes at 3.5, which is the least performant of all of the BB hydro packages at her tier. She also only runs her hydros for 100 seconds, which is the shortest duration of all Tier 9 battleships. I'm going to rate her a 3 for her acoustics. It's very special to have these, but the ones that she has, of course, are not super competitive with the German hydros that are available at Tier 9. Taking a look at the anti-aircraft capabilities of Karl XIV Johan, they're quite excellent, actually. Her long-range AA reaches out to 6 kilometers, and her mid-range AA dishes up a serious 501 hit points of damage per second, which is the absolute best for mid-range AA DPS at tier. She's also got a decent number of flak puffs that seem to do well against enemy aircraft. I'm going to rate her a 4 for AA. She's pretty good at swatting planes. I didn't find myself harassed by carriers too much when running her, but I do find talking about AA stats to be quite boring, so I'm just going to save some time and we're going to move on. With the exception of Jean Bart and Musashi, all Tier 9 battleships have the exact same ASW strikes, so that means Karl gets a 3! Yeah! Karl's top speed is 30.5 knots, which is extremely average. She ranks 18th out of 35 ships, and her rudder shift is just barely above the midpoint, which is very unexceptional. I'm going to rate her a 3 for maneuverability. Now, she does have really, really good stealth, which means that if you put brisk on your captain, you gain the benefit of that particular captain skill very, very frequently. If you pair that with a speed flag, you basically top out at 35.2 knots, which is a relatively large increase in speed. I did run the ship once or twice without this, and boy, I tell you, I could feel the difference in how slow the ship felt when I was trying to get around on the map. Thankfully, that stealth is so good good, you just really get a lot of benefit out of Brisk. So we'll talk about that in the captain build section. Consider it. Is Karl XIV Johan easy to play? She's probably easier to play than she is to say. There's a lot of syllables in that name. And I think she is pretty easy to play. She can smash heavier cruisers or battleships with large caliber HE, and when a cruiser makes a poor decision, turns broadside in front of you, your AP is going to be less likely to overpen than a ship that has larger guns. She will take big old chunky hits from heavier hitting battleships at her tier and above. I feel like I fought super ships very frequently in my testing of this boat. And when this happens, you need to take a few minutes, go dark, and heal up again. Her best in class and tier stealth will certainly help with this, provided that a hostile destroyer isn't shadowing you and spotting you for their team. Even very slow destroyers like Forrest Sherman can outpace this battleship and shower her with very annoying small caliber spam should they decide to do this. The remedy, of course, is to shoot back, preferably with your HE, and take big old chunks of their health away. This tends to dissuade them of the notion that you're going to be an easy kill, and with as many shells as K-14J can launch, it's not terribly difficult to do so. Her torpedoes are an excellent tool, and you should be launching them frequently. This requires that you play within 13.5 kilometers of your enemies, which is of course very doable thanks to the low detection ranges that I've been talking about throughout this video. In my best games, I landed multiple torpedoes. They're fast, they reload quickly, and you can launch 8 of them off each side of the ship. I mean, what's not to like? Don't ignore this opportunity for damage. All in all, the ship deserves a solid 4 for ease of play, provided that you are a battleship captain who is comfortable playing a little bit closer to the front lines. As a destroyer main, of course, this was very natural for me, but some captains may not see this as a good thing and might not share that opinion. But Clyde, what about fun? Is Karl XIV Johan fun to play? I mean, I think she really is. I enjoy small caliber battleships though, and if you don't, this ship might not be for you. She's got loads of usable torpedoes, she's got a fast main battery reload, and having both guns and torpedoes on a battleship keeps you busy throughout the entire battle. It means that you're always doing something cool, something that helps you achieve the goal, which is to win the match. It feels almost to me like you're playing a cruiser or a destroyer in terms of the APM, your actions per minute during the battle. And that makes the battle feel more kinetic and active and alive. I found that sometimes in an intense fight, my secondaries would start going off, and it would kind of surprise me. This is not really a secondary ship. I mean, you kind of start shooting at something within your main battery gun range, which is 19.1 kilometers, and then after a while maybe you go dark and you move to within torpedo range, which is 13.5 kilometers. Then you launch your torpedoes, and then you kind of close in on your target as they're becoming weakened by your earlier attacks, and then you open up your main battery as you get spotted, which is 10.6 kilometers, and then for me in my build, my secondaries go off at about 7.7 kilometers, and then I'm like, crap, I'm way too close, because I was just constantly engaged in fighting this other ship, and it was really fun to see the secondaries pop off like that. Now, as I said, Karl is not a secondary boat, and I do not recommend building her for secondaries. She has a lot of secondaries, and she has a high secondary DPM, but the accuracy is epically terrible with these secondaries, and as we've talked earlier, she's not really the tankiest battleship at tier 9 either. If you take a look at the hitting DPM as calculated by SHIPTOOL.ST, and I'll put a link to this wonderful website in the description of this video, it's actually very low compared to ships like, say, Georgia or Prince Rupert, which are known for their secondary prowess. I'm going to give her a 4 for fun because she really is kind of a unique battleship in some ways. She's more like a battle cruiser. She's certainly a more active playstyle than sitting in the back and sniping, and I really appreciate that about this ship. I don't think she's going to be for everybody. I don't think she's so fun that, you need to rush out and spend a ton of money on her. If you have other boats that you think are super fun, I don't know that you need this one. But if what I've been talking about throughout this video sounds like fun, you can consider the ship. I think if you wanted to wait, maybe see if she's ever available in a Santa box or some other way where you might be able to get her cheaper, that's fine. But remember, Santa boxes are pretty random and you never know what you're going to get, unless of course you've whaled everything else. Anyway, I do think the ship's fun. I don't know that it's a boat that if you don't have, you can't find happiness in life. I think you can be happy without Karl XIV Johan. But she's kind of a hoot. Are we going to see Karl XIV show up in competitive modes, clan battles, things like that? I really don't think so. I think the role of a battleship in clan battles is very specific in terms of tanking as well as doing big alpha damage, and Karl doesn't really do either of those things exceptionally well. So I'd be surprised if people wound up running this thing in clan battles, but I have been surprised in the past. So I'm going to rank her a 1 for competitive. I just don't think we're going to step away from the long-standing performers, the old reliables, if you will, to bring in a small caliber battleship that doesn't punch very hard and doesn't necessarily bring an overwhelming survivability quotient, if you will, to the battle. I've gone for a pretty basic battleship build here. We've started off with gun feeders so I can swap back and forth between HE and AP as opportunities come up. We've got grease the gears to rotate the guns faster. Pretty good pick for most battleships. Adrenaline rush to boost the DPM as we're taking damage. The ship's going to have a 25-second reload when she comes out, and depending on the rest of your configuration and as you take damage, you should be able to get your reload down into the teens as the battle progresses. We've gone with emergency repair expert and fire prevention expert to make the ship live longer and sustain itself in positions where it's giving the bad guys a hard time. And then, of course, concealment expert here, which is going to help us get down to that sub 11 kilometer detection. I also went with brisk. I think brisk is really powerful on Karl because she is so stealthy. It means it's active a larger percentage of the time, which means you're getting the benefit, and the speed at just over 30 knots without it is not particularly great, so anything you can do to speed it up is good. And then incoming fire alert, a kind of a throwaway point. You could throw it on emergency repair specialist if you wanted, or you could even throw it on demo expert to get a boosted HE fire chance, but I just don't know that that's necessarily the best. Maybe preventative maintenance. I think, you know, honestly, any of these one pointers kind of follow your heart there. You could swap brisk and incoming fire alert for long-range secondary shells. I don't recommend it. I tried it and it made the ship feel really slow, and her secondaries are just fireworks. They just make a lot of noise and colors and they don't really do anything. So I found that to be a bad deal, but you know, follow your heart, follow your dreams, do what makes you happy. Looking at upgrades for Karl XIV Johan, we've got main armaments modification 1, pretty standard pick for most battleships. Hydroacoustic Search mod 1, which I went with. If I wasn't going to do that, I'd do damage control system 1 to keep the thing in good running order. In the third slot, I went with aiming systems modification. Now, Wargaming recommends the torpedo tubes mod, which you could do. I think there's enough torpedoes on this boat. You could do a weird torpedo battleship build, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And I wanted to address some of the dispersion on the mains, and I feel like the aiming systems mod really did pay off. I haven't tried this, to be fair, so I'm really interested in trying it at some point. If you guys do, let me know what you found in the comments down below. Slot 4, I went with the damage control system mod 2, very standard battleship pick. Went with concealment system, again, the #1 concealment ship at tier 9 for battleships in the entire game. How could you not min-max into this capability? So that's what I've done. And then in the 6th slot, again, Wargaming recommends torpedo tubes mod to get faster reload time. But I stuck with main battery. I'm building into the guns on this one, and this has given me a 12% reload buff, which I feel is pretty darn helpful. Those are my upgrades for Karl XIV Johan. So that's the ship. That's Karl XIV Johan. What do you guys think? Is this a ship you're going to add to your port, or are you going to skip this one because it's a cash only? Are you going to skip it because you don't like small caliber battleships? I don't know. Or do you have to have it because it is a small caliber battleship with torpedoes, or maybe you're a nut job and you're going to try that secondary build I told you specifically not to do. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I can't wait to hear from you guys. Now, this ship did rate pretty well against other battleships. I'll put some other scores up here from the Hot Take series, other battleships we've looked at. And that happens partly because she has her extracurricular torpedo and hydroacoustic search features, which don't appear on other ships. That does not mean those other ships are not excellent, so please check out those videos, and I'll include some links down in the description of this video as well. Thank you a ton for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll catch you in our next stream live. Well, that's what streams are. Our next live stream, our next battle, our next YouTube video, or on the Clyde Plays Discord, which I'll put a link to in the description as well. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a great time. Goodbye!